Available in paperback and e-readers, John Haynes, Godbreaker. The man who rules the world takes on the Asgardian god of thunder in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes series adventure. Get your copy of John Haynes, Godbreaker in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere. Disney is looking like a studio in crisis. Now, according to reports, Disney CEO Bob Iger is looking to try to sell some linear assets such as the television network ABC, the cable network Freeform, and the cable network FX, and to sell their ownership of a property known as Hotstar. Now, Disney has been hemorrhaging money all this year from a series of box office failures such as Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, The Little Mermaid remake, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, and films like Disney Pixar's Elemental. Even worse, there has been a decline in attendance at their theme parks, which is a major cornerstone of their profits, and they have also seen millions of subscribers abandon its streaming service Disney Plus. And with the Disney empire in the worst place it's been since the late 1970s and early 1980s, before Michael Eisner turned things around, Bob Iger is looking to try to find some desperate road to get Disney back to profitability. Now, Disney's problems started out, I believe, in the 2010s, when Bob Iger showed a complete lack of vision, and he showed a complete lack of vision because instead of trying to look to create new intellectual properties, what Bob Iger looked to do was buy older properties from other companies in an effort to try to create brand new franchises. Now, this approach might work in the short term, but it doesn't really build an audience long term, especially with younger viewers who are the core audience for Disney's products. Now, the big problem with Bob Iger's whole overall approach was that he went out here looking to buy these older properties, not understanding that the core audience for those properties are in their middle ages, and as those audiences are in their middle ages, they basically have one foot in the grave and the other on a banana peel. For example, properties like Star Wars are almost 40 years old, and other properties like Indiana Jones are on their way to turning 40. Moreover, other properties like Alien and Predator are almost 38 or 35 years old, and these properties, yes, they were very popular with Gen Xers like myself and millennials. However, Disney has not gone out here and created new properties for younger audiences who are coming up right now, and they're not creating new characters for this new generation that really connects with them. And this is where Disney wound up losing its way as a studio. Disney spent most of its time looking to cater to older audiences because they had established income streams, and they looked to try to maintain these bases in order to go out here and make short-term money. But long-term, this has done damage to Disney's brand, and Disney is now having to deal with the consequences of Bob Iger's whole approach to business, which was focused on, again, buying older IPs, not understanding something I have understood ever since I studied the entertainment industry as a teenager, and that is that IPs depreciate over time. And what Bob Iger did, which was a major mistake, was going out here buying a whole bunch of companies like Marvel and Lucasfilm, believing that their intellectual properties had the same high value that they did in the 80s and the 90s. However, those intellectual properties were depreciating assets, and they were depreciating assets ever since Bob Iger went out here and bought them for billions of dollars, hoping to make billions more in profitability. And again, many of these properties, they were all 35, 36, even 40 years old, and the audience that grew up with them all saw them, again, as kids, like me, Gen Xers. When we were kids, we thought they were great, but our grandchildren don't see those properties in the same way. And that's where Bob Iger really shows me another concept that I've often observed with today's executives. They don't really understand the concept of time, and because they don't understand the concept of time, they go out here buying older properties, reminiscing about the old days when these properties were considered profitable, not understanding that to younger audiences, these are grandpa's characters, and with them being grandpa's characters, they don't relate to those characters, and this is the core of why Disney is struggling right now. Now, Disney is also struggling because they also, in addition to going out here and buying up all these older properties and looking to make new stories with these older properties, have gone out here and told stories in a way that has alienated a lot of their customers. And what Disney has done is go out here and try to put their identity politics onto many of these characters in what people call SJW/woke stories. And these woke stories where they look to race swap or promote a social justice agenda or alphabet agenda have alienated a lot of customers, and those customers have not really been interested in watching these stories where they go out here and try to retell a story that people already knew with these new and different themes. And what has happened is Disney has alienated its core customer base of Gen Xers and millennials who are parents and grandparents right now, and they have not really connected with the younger audiences they have been trying to sell products to. And as a result, Disney has suffered box office loss after box office loss with multiple movies like such as Strange World, which never really connected, or Elemental, which never connected, or remakes like Little Mermaid, or movies like Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. And because these films have not really connected with the audience, in spite of their hundreds of millions of dollars in budget, they have not gone out here and allowed Disney to create hit IPs like it did in the 90s and early 2000s with movies like Toy Story and movies like The Incredibles. No, what has happened is Disney is a company in crisis, and in the worst crisis it's been in ever since the late 70s and early 80s. And now that Disney is in a situation where they're basically jammed up, what they're looking to do is try to scramble to sell assets, and they're looking to scramble to sell assets to shore up a struggling company that was one of the big six media that emerged out of the Telecom Act of 1996. Now, in the days of the Telecom Act of 1996, Disney was out here buying lots of assets like it did with ABC and bought many cable networks, and as it bought up all of these assets, it became a juggernaut of a company. Unfortunately, as it became this juggernaut due to the Telecom Act, what has happened now is that that act has basically become karma for Disney, because now Disney is a big bloated corporate machine that can't really move and maneuver and adapt to a changing world as related to entertainment. And because Disney cannot maneuver and adapt, because now it's an obese, overweight company that basically is moving slow because it's holding on to old, depreciated IPs and spending millions of dollars on trying to invest in old IPs as they're trying to go out here and build a streaming service. Disney is not in a place where it can maneuver and adapt the way it thought it would be able to do as related to Netflix. Now, Disney went out here and I believe made the first of a series of tactical errors by going out here and walking away from Netflix, who was paying them to go out here and air their content on their streaming service. No, Bob Iger thought that he could go out here and air his own streaming service and have content on his own streaming service, and he would be able to reap the big profits that Netflix was making, not understanding that in order to have a streaming service, you need to maintain your infrastructure, and you need a lot of subscribers to maintain your infrastructure. But what drives people to a streaming service is content. unfortunately, Disney went out here and rushed out a lot of really poor quality content as related to their streaming service, Disney Plus, and looked to hold all of the subscribers up with the older content, but this was not enough to allow them to maintain their infrastructure as related to their streaming service, because it's the new content that really sells people to a streaming service, not the old content. Yes, a lot of older viewers who were Gen Xers and millennials, yes, they'll want to go out here and see classic shows that they made, like Gargoyles, or classic Disney movies like The Little Mermaid, the original. But what really drives a streaming service is the new content, and that's where Disney wound up falling completely apart, because they made the same tactical error as related to making content for Disney Plus that they did with their companies like Lucasfilm and Marvel, trying to push social justice and identity politics narratives in their content, alienating many of the older viewers and also alienating many of the younger viewers as well. And what most people did was they wound up watching maybe one or two shows like they do on Netflix and canceling Disney Plus, not going out here and keeping an ongoing subscription, and this really impacted their profits negatively, compounded with the box office flops, the declining revenue as related to visits to their theme parks, and this has put Disney in a place where Disney has gone from being a dominant studio to becoming a studio in crisis, the way it was in the late 70s and the early 80s. And Bob Iger, now that he sees that Disney has just become a complete mess under his incompetent leadership, is hoping to try to make a smooth world for himself by trying to sell off assets, and now looking to try to fix Disney by trying to sell off assets. But I don't think that's going to work. If anything, it just shows me a studio boss who was basically desperate, and so desperate that he's looking to go out here and sell off assets. And that basically shows me Disney is in the weakest position it was ever since about 1981 or 1982, which was near the rock bottom part where Disney basically was again nearing the rock bottom, because they had Fox and the Hound in the 80s that didn't really do that great, and then there was Black Cauldron that basically flopped, which ended the era of animation at Disney before we got the resurgence under Michael Eisner. And it looks like Disney may not be able to recover this time because of the bad deal that Disney's board made after reinstating Bob Iger as its CEO. Now, Bob Iger wanted to go out here and leave the mess to Bob Chapek, the new CEO. However, after getting into it with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, Bob Chapek was let go in the night, and Bob Iger was brought back. And even worse, Bob Iger was brought back to fix Disney, and instead of fixing Disney, he's basically making even more boneheaded decisions that are doing more damage to the Disney brand than anything that Bob Chapek did. Because what's happening here is that Bob Iger basically is showing a sign that Disney is in a weak position, because if he's looking to sell off assets, things are really bad. And things are really bad because Bob Iger really never had a vision for Disney. No, he was riding and coasting on the success of things like the MCU, which was started by Paramount with Iron Man, and also riding on the coattails of successes from people like John Lasseter, who was running Pixar, and running off the coattails of things like Lucasfilm properties. Again, running on the coattails of other individuals, but it was his bad decisions to go out here and purchase these assets that led to him damaging Disney overall, because these assets were depreciating, and these assets are depreciating as we speak, but he continues to look to make new derivative properties out of them, not understanding that you cannot go out here and appeal to younger audiences with old characters. This was something I learned back in the 80s when I was a boy, when people were trying to make Lone Ranger and Little Orphan Annie into something, and these 30s characters just never caught on in the 80s because they were from another generation. Now, Bob Iger would have been served better to go out here and contact a screenwriter like myself to create some new properties and some new characters and create some new characters that would resonate with today's audiences. But instead of looking to do that, he wanted to play it safe, looking to try to sell Star Wars and Indiana Jones to our grandchildren. And that has not really paid off for Bob Iger, and it hasn't paid off for Bob Iger, and he's sitting there scrambling trying to save Disney. But at this point, I don't think you can save Disney outside of bankruptcy, and that's the only road I see Disney on. Now, there are some that are speculating that Apple wants to buy Disney, but I wouldn't go out here and spend any money on this company because this Bob Iger has gone out here and financed Disney into a place where no smart businessman or businesswoman would buy that property even if they had the cash. And they say Apple has the cash, but I wouldn't spend that cash to pay full price for something that Apple could easily get in bankruptcy court for pennies on the dollar. Because with Disney right now, yes, the stock is tumbling and the price is high, but I wouldn't go out here and buy Disney, because if you buy Disney right now, what you're going to do is absorb a lot of that debt, because Bob Iger has gone out here and bought a lot of loans in order to buy 20th Century Fox. And because he's gone out here and got a lot of loans to buy 20th Century Fox, any company like Apple would only be bogged down in debt, and that debt is hard to get out of. So I wouldn't go out here and buy any of those assets. No, if he puts the assets up there, I wouldn't buy any of them. No, what I see what any smart businessman would do is what McKee Foods did with Hostess back in 2012, because in 2012, Hostess had a strike with its bakers as related to their contract, and what happened was this strike wound up leading to Hostess going bankrupt, because they did not come to an agreement, because Hostess management wanted his workers to go out here and take a pay cut, but instead of looking to take a pay cut, what Hostess's bakers did was hold out. And this led to the company winding up going out of business. And when the company went out of business, yes, a lot of union bakers lost their jobs. But what happened to Hostess was that Hostess assets winding up in bankruptcy court. And when they wound up in bankruptcy court, that's when McKee Foods, the owners of Little Debbie, decided to step in. And then when they decided to step in, they bought all the Hostess assets for pennies on the dollar. They basically were able to go out here and buy Hostess, Drake's, Wonder Bread, Dolly Madison, all of these different brands, and have all of those brands as part of their catalog for less than what it would have cost if they were to go out here and buy those assets as part of a business deal, or go out here and buy them piecemeal. They would have been able to go out here and buy every asset, and this is why we see Hostess and Drake's cakes made right now, because Little Debbie now is able to corner the market, and they were able to corner the market for pennies on the dollar, going out here and being able to profit at the expense of the incompetence of Hostess management, which never really, again, like Disney, went out here to create new innovative products, did not try to appeal to new younger audiences, but just coasted and was comfortable. And I wouldn't, again, go out here and spend any money on Disney or Disney assets right now. No, let all of those assets fall and let that company basically go into bankruptcy. Moreover, it's not a good thing for Disney to go, not Disney, but any company like Apple to go out here and buy Disney, or anybody to buy Disney assets, because Bob Iger still will be in charge, because he's been given a contract extension. So that's why I see any smart executive at Apple going out here and walking away from a Disney deal, because what good would you going out here and buying Disney or Disney assets benefit you if the same CEO who's running the company in the ground is still in charge of the company? That's what a critical thinker would say. Hey, I'm not going to go out here and buy this company if this guy is still in charge and he's still got a big fat contract, and he's already run the company into the ground. No, what I'm going to do is go out here and let this company go into bankruptcy court, and then when it goes into bankruptcy, what I'm going to do is buy the company and then buy those assets all together. And once I buy all the assets all together, then I don't need to deal with Bob Iger and his incompetence. I don't need to deal with all of the SJWs over at Disney. No, all those people will be out of work. And yes, this will be quite devastating to Hollywood to see one of the major film studios collapse. But this is what we reap, what we sowed, as related to the Telecom Act of 1996, which was pushed into legislation by Republicans and signed by President Bill Clinton. This piece of legislation would be the reason why Disney would have collapsed, because this complete consolidation of media basically is the result of the Telecom Act of 96, and what we're seeing with is what happens with the consequences of the Telecom Act, because the Telecom Act was about so-called deregulation, but deregulation led to the elimination of competition, and because it led to the elimination of competition, this is why many actors and writers can't find work, and this is why we have an actors and writers strike right now, because of all of this consolidation, which eliminated competition. And with this elimination of competition, what has happened is we've gotten a studio that has become a big bloated institution that cannot adapt to the marketplace. And because it cannot adapt to the marketplace, it has gone out here getting caught up in the whole plan of nostalgia, trying to appeal to older audiences, because CEOs like Bob Iger are disconnected and detached and are not connected to their audience to understand that you have to go out here and create new properties in order to go out here and maintain profits with younger audiences. Because again, Hollywood has always been a young man's game, and it takes visionaries to go out here and understand how to appeal to young audiences. It takes visionaries to go out here and say, I'm going to create content that appeals to younger crowds, because it's the younger crowds that have impulse money and will go out here and spend money to go see new characters and new stories. Yes, your back catalog does make you a lot of money, and it's very good to have a back catalog, but any seasoned CEO understands that the back catalog is a depreciating asset, and you cannot really go out here and look to hold on to the back catalog, because as I've run SJS Direct, yes, I have a lot of backlist books, but I'm always launching front list books, because it's the front list books that sell the backlist books. And the same thing happens with movies. It's the front list movies that sell the backlist movies. And again, IPs do get older, IPs do depreciate, IPs do lose value over time, because audiences get older, audiences die, audiences pass on, and again, their children are not going to resonate and relate to the same characters, because what I see the big problem with Disney is that you've got a lot of people from the 80s who again don't understand the concept of time and don't understand that the 1980s were 40 years ago, and much of the stuff we thought was cool in the 80s looks like our grandpa's stuff, because we are becoming grandparents, and this is what flies over the heads of guys like Bob Iger that have led to the Disney studio winding up being in crisis, as they look to pander to people with what they call SJW woke material that basically uses the flash of identity politics and social justice to cover up for the lack of substance in their stories. And because their stories don't have substance, like many of the movies that basically saved Disney, like The Little Mermaid and many other films like Pretty Woman, which really connected with people, what has happened is Disney has become again a bloated bureaucratic machine that is just filled with a whole bunch of people who are running the company into the ground, like Victoria Alonso, who was terminated, Kathleen Kennedy, and many others who really don't understand the business of film and don't understand that in the business of film, again, you need to be focusing on a core customer base of younger people, like what I try to do with SJS Direct, with characters like John Haynes and Isis and Esteem. And even I know that I'm on a borrowed time because, again, these characters, again, they depreciate over time because as one generation gets to know a character, another generation has a different life experience. And because these generations have different life experiences, the way they see the world is different than we did back 40 years ago. And this is why Bob Iger is scrambling to try to sell these companies, hoping to get out from under the mess that he made. But there's no getting out from the mess that he made because he really was never a visionary. He really never was somebody who had a vision for where he wanted to go with Disney. And because he did not have a vision for where he wanted to go with Disney, that's why we see Disney basically reaping what it sowed back in the 90s when they tried to consolidate media. And we're seeing most of these assets being put up, basically showing us that the only way for a studio to survive is if there is competition. And we really need to understand that this is the reason why we need to get rid of that Telecom Act. That Telecom Act basically was the greed of executives looking to go out here and make big money. And now that there's no more money to be made, they're seeing their empires implode. And as we see their empires implode, we're seeing the face of media change as new competitors are coming in, such as the company that made The Sound of Freedom. And we may basically see a major revolution in media. We may see a revolution in media where we see smaller companies basically replace these big studios, and that may basically change the entire dynamics as related to entertainment here in America. Now, if you want to pick up my screenplay books like All About Marilyn and All About Nikki, you can find those books on Amazon.com in paperback right now by clicking the link in the description box. And if you want to pick up some of my action-packed fantasy fiction on the SJS Direct imprint, such as the Isis series, the Esteem series, the John Haynes series, and the books of the Spinsterella trilogy, and my sorority novel, The Thetas, my business novel, A Recipe for Success, and my vampire novel, Eternal Night, you can find all those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find them at other online booksellers like Smashwords, the iBookstore, and Google Play. And if you want to see me make more videos like this about entertainment, you can send a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Coming to paperback and e-readers, John Haynes, 1987. Learn lessons about life and teenage love in the 1980s with this coming-of-age John Haynes story. Pre-order your copy of John Haynes, 1987 at online booksellers everywhere. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.